All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first Member Appreciation Month event of 2020. I'm so excited to have so many of you here with us today virtually. Sorry you can't see me, but my name is Hannah Millen, and I'm the manager of individual giving here at the museum. And I came up with this whole month of events just for our members as a way to say thank you so much for your continued support throughout the years, and especially throughout this year. It's been a very trying year at best, and we're so grateful to have your friendship. So I just wanted to highlight a couple more events that we have coming up in the next week and the following week for Member Appreciation Month. If you haven't already signed up for them, I would definitely recommend signing up for them. On this Thursday, we're going to be doing a talk called Collection Curios with our collections manager and registrar, Jillian Suss. Jillian has gone in and picked out some really unique and fun items from our collection that haven't probably been seen on display in many years or even at all. She's going to show us some secrets that we have hidden down in our vault. It's going to be really exciting, so I would definitely check that out. That's going to be this Thursday, November 5th at 12 p.m. And then next week we have a couple of events coming up. My personal favorite is going to be our meet and greet with some of the dissonance artists. I've been in contact with all of them, and we are going to have artists coming in throughout the day to do an informal meet and greet with our members. So you'll have the opportunity to chat with any artist who's there that day to kind of hear about their inspirations of their work and just have a conversation and get to know them. The list of artists is going to be sent out in an email this week of who's going to be joining us next Tuesday. This will be an all-day event. No RSVPs are required, but please know that we will have capacity restrictions on the gallery space. And finally, we're going to end next week with a special event that'll be, at least to my knowledge, the first ever of its kind here at the Morris Museum. We're going to have the first ever Morris Museum Trivia Night. So it's going to be a virtual event, and it's going to be 3 rounds of trivia so you can test your knowledge about the Morris Museum. We'll have all sorts of interesting questions about the museum's history, including things that we used to have on display, things we used to have in our collection, and just some information about the museum in general. That's all coming up next week. I'm going to be sending out emails to our members this week with all this information in it, and it's all posted on our website as well. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to our speakers for today. Today, we are going to be doing our annual presentation of Inside the Bickford Theatre with our Curatorial Director of Live Arts, Brett W. Messenger. And he's going to be in conversation with our board chair of the Live Arts Committee and trustee of the museum, Marsha Baldinger. Welcome. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you folks.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Marsha.
Hi, Hannah. You're looking very much like Cleveland Johnson today.
I'm incognito today.
I'm really happy to be here. And I'm really excited to have a conversation with Brett and hopefully invite our guests, our members, to participate. Please feel free, everyone, to use the chat feature, ask questions in real time. We'd love for everyone to be engaged, and we'd love for this to be an interactive conversation that includes you in it, as opposed to having you just watch. So I am going to just jump in and start our conversation asking Brett, who you may not know, came to us from peak performances at Montclair State, and before that was at the Santa Fe Opera. And I would love to know a little bit about your path and what led you out to Santa Fe, what led you back to Montclair, and how do you wake up one morning and find yourself in Morristown?
That's a great question. It's really been a circuitous journey to this point, and one that makes me really feel a bit like an imposter at several stops along the way. I went to New York as a student for visual arts, And having grown up in Syracuse, I had just enough access to culture to know that there was so much more out there. So when I went to New York, I was really intrigued by opera because it was this big, confusing, hard to understand thing. So by December of my freshman year, I was going a couple of times a week. And then halfway through December, I started as an intern at the Metropolitan Opera. So my relationship with the Santa Fe Opera started that summer after freshman year. I was looking for a way to not have to go back home to Syracuse for the summer. And as I'm sure we're all aware, there are not many arts internships that are paid. The Santa Fe Opera has one of the best arts internship programs. If you know of anyone that's looking to do arts administration, it's paid, they give you travel and housing. So I got very lucky and I ended up out there and developed great relationships. So I ultimately started a graduate program in visual arts and contemporary art history that I left when I got the call that they had a job opportunity in the New York office of the Santa Fe Opera. The Santa Fe Opera is a summer festival, so there's a small team of people that work out of a townhouse on the Upper East Side for 7 months of the year and then fly out for the summer festival. So that was an incredible opportunity, and I got to work on several American premieres and world premiere operas, a recording project of Cold Mountain, which was a new opera that we mounted. That recording actually was nominated for a Grammy, which was exciting. But what I found was
Music on it.
What's that?
Who was the composer of Cold Mountain?
Jennifer Higdon. She's a Philadelphia-based composer, and that was her first opera, and a really, really huge, fun project to be a part of. But I realized the thing I was most excited about, besides working in such a beautiful place with some of the world's best artists, was tackling these new works and really challenging ourselves and our company and our artists and our audiences. So after 3.5 years of doing that, I started to think about what my next step would be. And I wanted to work in a place that was doing a lot of new works. And I could go anywhere. I was ready to leave New York. I could go to Philadelphia, Minneapolis, Houston, Los Angeles. And the job that ultimately got me was in Montclair, New Jersey, which was sort of a funny happenstance. You wouldn't expect to go to New Jersey to do some of the most cutting edge things. But Peak Performances is a program that does huge, big budget, international experimental works. And it was a great, great opportunity. So I knew nothing about New Jersey. And ultimately, like so many New Yorkers, thought it was sort of the worst place you could possibly go. So I'm really delighted to share with you the fact that after living here for probably 6 months, I woke up and thought, I have some of the best friends. I love where I live, the restaurants, the arts and culture. So I was really excited when I saw the job opportunity here at the Morris Museum to extend my stay and to develop something new.
That's wonderful. Well, Montclair's loss is Morristown's gain. I'm curious. Oh, actually, before I continue, I want to give a shout out to someone who I hope is with us today, Gary Knapp, who's a new friend of the museum. And without Gary's generosity and enthusiasm, the incredibly successful series of live arts out on the back deck this summer, specifically the Lots of Strings series, would not have been possible. So thank you, Gary. Just remember, and I speak from personal experience, at the Morris Museum, no good deed goes unpunished. And you will be a friend for a long, long time to come. So thank you. So Brett, I was just curious, at Montclair, you were programming within the context of a university. And here at the Bickford, you are programming not really through the lens of a museum, but certainly within the context of a museum setting, as I believe we are perhaps the only museum in the country with a fully rigged, what's it called, a proscenium stage?
Proscenium stage, yeah. It's a unique feature in a museum. And the job description was calling for somebody to reinvent the programming in the Bickford Theatre. And that's a really exciting thing for somebody in this industry to read. You know, the opportunity to create something new and to tie it to something really unique.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to have a stage next to galleries and to look at the stage through that lens is a really exciting thing. You know, yes, we want it to be entertaining and exciting, but also enriching in a different way. You know, you don't necessarily walk into a gallery with the expectation that you won't be challenged, and to contemplate things and to really see something that's unexpected. So to have the opportunity to look at the stage in that way as an extension of that museum experience was something that was really exciting to me. And as we are actively evolving and changing so quickly and figuring out who we are as a center for kinetic art and sound and motion, to think about the programming that makes sense for this theater within this museum, in dealing with science and technology very often, and multidisciplinary works that are new and unusual, but that really drive home the experience you might get in the Guinness collection or through several of our you know, featured exhibitions.
I can certainly say with confidence that since your arrival at the Morris Museum, even before, but most definitely since our affiliation with the Smithsonian Institution and Museum in DC, and as the only Smithsonian affiliate in the state, you have brought, as we sort of move toward our new incarnation as the Morris Museum of Art, Sound, and Motion, you have certainly brought that to the Bickford and to the museum in terms of programming so much dance, I'll say performances with motion that combine dance with all other forms of movement, many other forms of movement, expressive movement. I'm thinking of XOXO Moon Girl this summer out on the back deck. So it's been wonderful to really see the sound and motion coming to life beyond simply performing plays on our stage, but really making our stage and our theater more integral with our mission as a museum of art, sound, and motion. So where does your experience and familiarity and knowledge of the dance and movement world come from?
Yeah, that's another good question. And going back to my joke of being a bit of an imposter, if you had asked me 5 years ago what I thought of dance, I probably would have said that it was my least favorite form. And now it's something that's so much the center of what I look for as an audience member and as a presenter. I went to dance all the time. My roommate in college, I worked at the opera and he worked for American Ballet Theater. So I was constantly going to the ballet, and I found myself feeling anxious, like there was something I was missing. It was so perfect and elegant, and I wanted some source of friction or danger, or to be exploring something a little differently. And while I was working in Montclair, we did the American premiere of a piece with the Cullberg Ballet from Sweden. And it was a piece by Deborah Hay, who 50 years ago, 60 years ago in the West Village was one of the biggest performance and dance innovators of her day. And now she's sort of this elder stateswoman of experimental dance. And it totally threw me for a loop and forced me to reimagine what dance can mean. And now dance is so central to what I look for. And there are so many choreographers that I'm so excited about working with. And so it's fun in this career to constantly challenge myself and learn through the process of working with artists. But a lot of our biggest achievements in the theater in the last year have been through dance. We did that dance circus piece to open the live art series with Javier Zul, which if you saw it, this is the sort of thing where there were aerialists, but it was telling a story. It was as anthropological as it was movement-based, and a really great way to open a season that says, okay, this is not going to look like what you are used to in this room. And then our final production that we were able to mount before having to shut down was with Kyle Marshall, who, if you saw that was a totally different way of looking at dance and movement. But he's a young artist. He's actually the first artist that I contacted before I accepted the job here. I had worked with him as a dancer. I had followed his work from studios and classrooms to black box theaters to bigger theaters. And I told him that as soon as I was in a position to book him, he would be the first artist that I called. And that was true. So we started planning, but what happened was in the time that I contacted him and our meeting, probably a month before I actually started working here, he had received a big award that was a real surprise to everybody in the dance industry. So I joked that he would soon be getting calls from bigger places, and he laughed and said that he already had, and that he would be at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in December, which is a huge thing to be a part of their Next Wave Festival. So I said, okay, well, you're already out of our league financially. How can we make this work? What is it that you do need? And he said, I need residency time. So it was this perfect opportunity for us. We have the space, and we gave him time to develop a new work and to rehearse with his dancers. And we were able to pay part of his fee up front because a donor said, okay, we want to help make this happen. And so it's an example of a couple little things that we can do as a smaller part of the performing arts ecosystem to pull something off that's really big. So in December, he was at BAM. He got a profile in the New York Times. They reviewed his work, and I believe the quote was that he had a choreographic voice like no one else's. And a month later, he was premiering a new work here in the Bickford Theatre as part of the Live Arts program. So that's indicative of the approach that I take. I want to have artists on site interacting with the community. I want to do big things with our small budget. I want to find inventive ways to do things that are meaningful for artists so that we can do the most engaging and exciting productions that we can for our audience.
I think also the fact that we are a fully equipped theatrical stage combined with an intimate auditorium of just over 300 seats means that you can really come to the Morris Museum and have more of an intimate experience with you're more aware of who's experiencing this with you. And also you bring up a very interesting point, which you talked about a donor who helped make the Kyle Marshall residency possible. And we already thanked a donor who helped make our Lots of Strings series possible. Would you talk a little bit about the unique interactive way you've sort of been evolving the Bickford Theatre at the Morris Museum in terms of audience member donor participation? It seems like a little bit of a, if you build it, they will come, so I would challenge our members and our audience to say, if you see something, say something to Brett, and you never know. It's a wonderful opportunity, I think, that Brett affords to get to know our members and our audience and our community.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I really love having artists on site creating things. It's on one hand a way to do something that's valuable to them, because having residency time is the one thing you can't get from the really big places. Lincoln Center, BAM, they can't afford to give that to you with their schedules. But it also gives us the opportunity to have a tea and talk. And so a small group of members and guests can interact directly with an artist and ask questions. And that was really, really meaningful, both with Javier Zul and Kyle Marshall, but particularly with Javier Zul, because his work is about his life. And he grew up in the jungles of southern Mexico, in the jungle. And as these talks go, you know, I said, I want this to really be a conversation with our members. And generally, people want to, of course, ask intelligent questions. And so people started asking, you know, rather interesting, intelligent questions. Luckily, we had a 9-year-old boy. And he raised his hand. His name is Ezra. I've actually run into him since. And he said, but you said you grew up in the jungle. Did you have to go to school? What did you eat? What did you like? Did you have to take math class? And all of these really basic questions. And you saw all of these adults sort of leaning in like, yeah, that's what I want to know. Like, what does that actually mean? And it got into really interesting territory. And the people that participated in that saw his work in a totally different light. It was so much richer because they knew this person that had created it. I think building relationships between artists and audiences is one of the most meaningful things we can do here.
I could not agree more. As someone who came to some art forms later in my life, I can say that experiencing types of performances that you haven't previously and discovering how much you enjoy them is just an incredible pleasure. For me personally, it was, while I had a background in, to a certain extent in classical music and symphonic music and loved it and always loved the theater, I came to opera also at the Met relatively recently, in the last 15 years, and have just been dumbstruck by how much I love it and how much I still have to learn about it, but I never really was open to discovering it until, for whatever reason, 15 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about recent life at the Morris Museum and the Bickford and the Bickford outdoors, shall we say, as we have been challenged as a museum to maintain ourselves, our mission, and our sense of ourselves as a refuge and a haven for our members and for the community during the COVID months. And as we look forward, certainly for the next few seasons into the spring, we will still be evolving our selves as a cultural institution that you can engage with and feel safe engaging with. And I guess that brings us not just to the fact that the museum has been open. We were actually, I think, the first museum to reopen in this area, certainly. And when friends of mine said to me, well, is it safe? Is it safe? And I said, a museum? A museum is the perfect cultural institution to give yourself the pleasure of during COVID, because number one, we've been at 25% occupancy, and museums are not about sitting down or touching things. So when you want to just come, give yourself an eyeful, an earful, and a head full of culture and something different, it's been a wonderful refuge, I think, and safe. But you brought something completely different to the Morris Museum this past summer, and something that started out with mosquitoes and finished up with hand warmers. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you got the idea to do performances out on our back parking deck, and what it took to wrap our collective minds around that as an institution.
Yeah. Well, like so many great things, it was really desperation. I was so desperate to do my job again. So as soon as Governor Murphy raised the limit on outdoor events, I think everybody that has a position like mine immediately thought, okay, what can we do? We are very lucky here at the Morris Museum in that we have a really good space to do things. Mayo Pac has and continues to do drive-in concerts. And other places are doing some things virtually. They don't have a space to do things outside. The back deck is really a great accidental venue. And I came out, I was working from home. I drove out and I walked the grounds because we have a huge property that's hilly and uneven. And I looked at all the different places, and that was really the only place that I felt like we could do something.
I call it, to my friends, by the way, I always say, well, it's kind of like Tanglewood on the tarmac.
Yeah, and two of the critics that came over the summer also talked about how it reminded them of Tanglewood, which is a pretty amazing thing. But what began as 4 jazz concerts, and then quickly then we added 4 string quartets, turned into 19 live performances. And with over 3,300 patrons, more than half of which were here for the first time. They'd never been to the theater or the museum before. So we've developed this whole new group of friends, which is incredible. And so many of them came not just once, but several times. There were many people that I looked forward to seeing every week, which is a really great thing. I think it's fair to say, if you look around the country, that in that quarter, we were the most significant presenter of classical music anywhere. And I was getting calls from the Colorado Friends of Chamber Music that does a really top-notch chamber music series in Denver. And they were like, okay, we want to consult with you. We want to know, how do you do this? What's the best way? And I thought, there's really no secret. Find a really good parking lot with a good view and not too much noise around it, and have a really good team. We're a very small team. If you look at the staff lists at all the other performing arts centers anywhere, it really comes down to this core team that works so efficiently. Louis Perlmutter, our technical director, I called him up and immediately he started drafting his plans on what the challenges were and how we could solve them. Laurel, our theater manager, immediately started walking through it in her mind to find what the challenges would be and what we needed to confront before making this live. Hannah, who introduced this program, and Sonia, our graphic designer, we were announcing things so quickly. It's like, we had a concert, we're about to do another, let's get it online. Hannah let everybody know. And it was just this really well-oiled machine. And overnight, we started presenting some of the most impressive classical music ensembles for the biggest safe crowds you could do. And really, what an incredible ride. I feel so fortunate.
I found it very moving, frankly, not just to see many new faces, at those events, but to see just even often a completely different demographic. As you said, people who had never been to the museum. I loved seeing people seated as far back as my eye could see. You know, if I stood at the front of the end of the parking lot near the stage, it was just sort of this horizon line of people enjoying the performances. And that was very moving. And I know that the New York Times did a wonderful review, and basically they said nothing beats live music. Oh my gosh, we've missed this so much. And it's wonderful to be able to live stream, and it's wonderful to be able to stream classic performances in, you know, many different genres. But nothing beats live performances, and nothing beats live music. And I was very moved at every performance by the performers themselves expressing to the audience how grateful they were for the opportunity to play together in person for the first time since February. And even though they try and rehearse and perform and do streaming remotely, and I'm sure we've all participated in a lot of remote events, and they're wonderful, especially when they're live, but I can't imagine what it must be like as an ensemble performer to be performing in the box of my computer screen and seeing my fellow performers in their little boxes. And even though together we make beautiful, beautiful music, they were just beyond ecstatic to be able to play together in front of people. And
yeah. Well, the audience is such an important component in that. I mean, as in the Brechtian sense, that's what creates the spectacle, is a shared experience with friends and strangers of something that's happening live. And without the audience there, there's a huge part of that missing. And you can recreate that in certain ways virtually, but it's not the same. And you don't feel the music in the same way when it's coming through your speaker or your computer.
absolutely.
Certainly not with the level of speakers that I have in my apartment. But one of my favorite things throughout this season has been the time in the day where I chalk, you know, A1, B4, that's your block.
B4.
And I generally time that to happen with the sound check and rehearsal. And so I'm walking through the parking lot, chalking everyone's block numbers and hearing just incredible music. And it would strike me before every performance how incredibly lucky I was to have that, because that has become sort of the ultimate luxury commodity in this time where, you know, before it was certainly a treat to be able to go and hear great live music, but it was something that we were all able to do. It's become such a rare thing for the artists and the audiences.
I think the emotional impact has been magnified exponentially for the performers as well as the audience. And it's ironic because the impact is so magnified and intensified, and yet, unless they're wind instrument players, they're wearing masks. The audience are spread out in these 8-foot by 8-foot or 10-foot by 10-foot squares on the parking lot in their own chairs. And it was amazing. I loved seeing how the first few events back on the back deck, people knew to come with their folding chairs. Everybody came with their folding chairs, and, you know, people brought maybe a bottle of water, and some of the really seasoned Tanglewood veterans maybe brought a bottle of wine and some plastic cups. By the last several concerts, people had dinner, they had coolers, they had tray tables. One person or group in front of where we were sitting actually had a little vase with flowers. It reminded me of, became more of a tailgate than just sitting and watching music. Also, not to sound like we were capitalizing on a tremendous global misfortune, but I think it's safe to say that the ensembles and artists who performed on our back deck were of a caliber and renown that we would never have dreamt of even reaching out to, simply because we couldn't afford to program them. With 300 plus seats, there was no amount we could charge that could make them accessible to us. And describe a little bit of how this turned things on these circumstances, turned things on their heads.
Yeah, it really caught me off guard because I'm incredibly bold and shameless. And I will contact all sorts of artists and just say, I love your work. I'm really interested in doing something. I can't offer you the sort of fee we normally do, but these are the things we can offer. If you're interested, let me know. And that technique has gotten me very far in my short time here at the museum and bringing some really big name artists for fees that are just not in the same ballpark. Mm-hmm. And with the Lot of Strings Music Festival, those sorts of fees were really meaningful to those musicians who are scrambling to make rent, right? I mean, it's really, it was meaningful for them to have an audience, but to also to have a little bit of money. And
sure.
So that was really great, but I would not have been so bold as to reach out to the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. And I often joke that anyone who's emailing me to perform in the Bickford Theatre, like, just send it to my spam folder, or don't forward it to me. It's usually somebody on a unicycle with a flute that also does a card trick. And I mean, and they'll start adding things like, it's like whatever things that they can pull out of their trunk. And I'm usually mortified by the proposals. So when I read this email, I was about to go into my weekly meeting with Cleveland, our executive director, and I laughed out loud, and I had to reread it. I was like, she's from the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra? And the way the email read was so like, oh, if you could consider us, like, here's a link to our website if you've never heard of us. I mean, it was just, I just cracked up. And when I told Cleveland, he said, the Orpheus? So that has developed into a really great relationship that we can build on. I've already been in discussion with their general manager about what we can do in the spring and the summer. After our last concert on the 24th, her first question to me was, how soon do you think we can be back out here?
Wow.
Which was great.
How warm you can keep their fingers.
Yeah. And these, all of the musicians that play in Orpheus also play in other ensembles. These are people that you might hear at New Jersey Symphony Orchestra or the New York Philharmonic or the Metropolitan Opera. I mean, they play in all of these top ensembles, and the pandemic forces everyone to get creative and to adapt. And one of the most exciting conversations I had towards the end of our season was with Eric Bartlett, who's the cellist with Orpheus. So if you came to those concerts, you would have heard him twice. And he is also the cellist one of the cellists for the New York Philharmonic. And he lives in Bergen County. And when he couldn't rehearse and play with the Philharmonic or Orpheus, he contacted 3 other New Jersey-based instrumentalists from the New York Philharmonic, and they formed a quartet. And just for one project. And they did a recording project that he is going to send me. And that went so well for them, they want to continue on. And so it's likely that we will give their public debut, their actual first performance in front of a live audience this spring.
That's fantastic.
And so it's exciting to see what artists are coming up with and how we can connect them to audiences.
Well, I would just say to our audiences and members who are watching, this is really a never before opportunity at the Bickford and in our area, and at the museum. And several of the events this past summer and fall sold out. I know I had friends who, if it wasn't for a couple of same-day cancellations that came in, they would have not been able to even attend. And I would say that the popularity of these programs, not just during a pandemic, but going forward, tell everyone you know, tell your friends, particularly if you're new to the museum. I'm guessing you have a lot of friends who are new or perhaps still strangers to the museum. Let them know what's happening in up on the hill on Columbia Turnpike in Morristown, and encourage them to come with you and experience this. I personally am just already counting down, sort of like the performers, until I think it might be warm enough for us to start this up again. And who knows, maybe at some point, because I know Brett was very frustrated on a couple of occasions by rain, because rain is just a non-starter. It's just no way around it. If it's more than a 40% or so chance of rain, it's not happening. And a couple times you were lucky enough to have the performers be available. I mean, not so lucky for them, but very lucky for us to come the next night. I mean, it's lucky for the performers, but their schedules just aren't as full, and therefore they're much more flexible and anxious to reschedule. But what do you think the possibility might be for the spring and summer series to involve some sort of covering so that, with open sides, but perhaps, do you think that some of our performances, obviously not XOXO Moon Girl or something with a trapeze rig, but do you think that that would enable you to do even more programs in terms of, programs several times a week, let's say?
Sure. Yeah. If you know anyone that can make a gift to make that possible, let me know. That would
Just
really
putting it out there. Just putting it out there, Brett.
That would really change what we're able to do.
Yeah.
I'm just now able to start to take a breath and look back at the data and to figure out what we can do. And I'm confident that once the weather is strong, we can do 2 concerts a week and sell them out or sell them close to capacity, which is really exciting. But you need to build in time for rain dates. So
Right.
the rain is one of the big challenges.
Right.
But as I'm looking back, I mean, I have the list of everyone who came to performances, and I go back through and I look, wow, this is someone who had never been to the Morse Museum that came 6 or 7 times in the last few months. We have a great opportunity to continue to serve those audiences and do really meaningful work. The challenges are huge. I feel like just today, I feel sort of more human again. It's been such an exhausting and exciting run.
Right.
But on Friday night, I was on the phone with my father, and he said, well, you've had almost a week. What's your next big idea? And I said, well, I guess, yeah, I need to start thinking about that, because people, especially now, there's so much uncertainty, so much turmoil. Having experiences that are beautiful and intimate and live are so important. And we need that. So the weight of responsibility feels huge to me in figuring out ways that I can continue to provide those sorts of experiences for people. And if I can figure out the best way to do that in these winter months, that's the real goal. We know how to do it outside now.
I would encourage people, write to Brett, email him. What's your email, Brett?
It's bmessenger@morrismuseum.org.
Write to Brett, reach out, ask him questions, give him your thoughts, give him your ideas. I will say it was very interesting because Brett, as curatorial director of live arts, you know, I watched you over the summer evolve into this sort of old world impresario with replete with your groupies. At the end of most performances, you'd get swarmed by your people telling you, this was amazing, this was wonderful, you know, how'd you do this? And, oh, are you gonna do this again? And, you know, as I was walking to my car, had I wanted to say, hey, Brett, great job, you know, people were 3 deep around you.
Yeah.
I just kept walking.
And it's such a pleasant change because just 2 years before when I started here, I stood in the lobby before the first performance that I hadn't programmed, I didn't know anything about. It was my first week on the job, and there was a swarm of people telling me how upset they were.
Right, exactly.
How they don't like what I'm going to do. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to do yet.
Change is hard. Change is hard, and especially when there's an unknown. I think it's safe to say the change that Brett Messenger has brought has been good and has been like, especially the last several months, you know, slipping into a warm bath of beautiful sounds and sights and community. And I think that we will all be extremely highly rewarded.
Yeah, thank you, Marsha. It's fun in both of those cases to know that we have an invested audience. And I love this sort of Bickford tradition of coming out and people will tell me exactly what they thought.
Yep.
And that's a sign of a really great and engaged audience. You don't see that at many places where you go to Broadway, the show ends, and people immediately stand up for a standing ovation.
Right.
It's almost like just the ritual, and I think that's pretty ridiculous. That's why I love the audiences at the Met Opera. You sit there, and if they don't like it, the people up in the family circle, they will boo.
Right.
And I know people that buy tickets in advance to boo because they know they don't like the production or they don't like the singer, and they want to pay to see this so that they can have their voice heard.
There's no crazy like opera crazy.
Yeah.
I feel I am seasoned enough now to know that. Good and bad. So.
But as long as you're buying tickets, come to tell me you don't like it. I'll take it. But
so,
you know, it's
as your last thought. Is there a teaser you'd like to leave people with? I can say that for our members and audience, stay tuned because I'm sure there will be email teasers of what's to come. But what would you like to leave our new Live Arts members and audience with?
just that we can do great things as a small team, and you can be a part of that team. That's really evidenced so clearly in the gift that Gary gave. That was a gift that he had originally given towards Inflatable Space, which was a production that we were going to do.
Not inflatable space like a tent.
No,
it was a performance call.
Yes, it was the cover of our brochure. And this was a production I was really excited about for April, and one that was incredibly challenging for us financially and technically. And I met with Gary, and he said that he wanted to make a gift to help our most challenging thing become possible. And that's, I mean, what's more exciting than hearing that? And so then immediately he made this gift and the world shut down.
Right.
So he agreed to use that gift, but then he also sort of became a producer and a co-conspirator. And we spent an evening on the back deck talking about how it could work, what the challenges would be. We socially distantly had a glass of wine, and he brought his speaker. And it's the power that one person can do. You know, he was able to bring this gift that made that whole thing possible. And we're a small enough organization where something like that can be transformative. So as we start plotting and thinking about the next great wild things we can do to connect artists with audiences again, you know, gifts of 100, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, they can make that a reality.
Right. Right.
And so it's exciting to be a part of such a great community that's ready to roll their sleeves up with us to make these things happen. And the impact is so huge.
And instantaneous, really.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that's very gratifying. As wonderful as our exhibitions are, have been, can be, will be, they're not, quote, one night only.
Right.
There's something very exciting and emotionally charged about a performance that, you know, is one night only. And it's exciting. So I hope that our new friends will become old friends. I hope our new friends will tell more new friends. And I think that you'll be very busy in the next few months, looking toward the spring and the summer, and I can't wait. You know, we've all become so conditioned to bracing ourselves and anticipating things that are a few months ahead with dread and apprehension and fear and concern. And I can say without hesitation that this is something I feel confident is going to happen. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be even better than it was, mainly because it'll have the benefit of several months of planning as opposed to several days of planning. And I think it's a wonderful light to be able to look forward to as we go into what are the dark days of winter. So
Yeah.
bravo to you.
Well, thank you, Marsha. Let's open this up. Let's hear, I think we've already had a couple questions from the audience.
Great.
So I'm just checking the chat right now. From Joseph Igora, we have a message to Brett and the board. Many kudos to Brett and to the board that supported his imagination and courage. And then we have a question from Will Leland. The New York Times had a great review of one of the back deck concerts. Is there any hope that they will continue to review Bickford performances?
There's great hope. The New York Times suspended coverage of New Jersey a long time ago. Essentially, they cover what happens in New York, and if it's a big enough event, they will send a critic, like they do most years, to the Santa Fe Opera to review things. But they cut that department, so they don't regularly review things that are outside of the city. So it's a big challenge to get that. When they came for the Jack Quartet, it was because this was happening, and the Jack Quartet is recognized as one of the preeminent ensembles for new music. So they sent not one but two critics, both of whom their writing I really admire, and I've enjoyed reading their work. And Zachary Wolfe, one of those two critics that came to review that, the last time I had crossed paths with him professionally was in 2015 when I worked at the Santa Fe Opera. And that was around the time that I was starting to fix up my resume and think about applying for the next thing. And if you've ever been to the Santa Fe Opera, you know that it's just the most gorgeous, glamorous, beautiful place to take in a performance. And I met him in passing as he was there reviewing our shows that ultimately would lead to a very mediocre, lukewarm review. And if he had said to me that the next time we would cross paths would be because I was programming concerts in a parking lot in New Jersey, I probably would have cried myself to sleep. But in the end, it's turned out to be such an incredible highlight. So yeah, there's hope. I mean, we just need to continue to be the organization that's doing the thing that they feel the world needs to know about.
I will say, at least certainly to the New York Times and those reviewers, there were two of them. And I remember the review, they did it sort of as a conversation between the two of them, sort of like things you hear on NPR when two people are having a conversation. And it was wonderful. But I think that you should take pleasure in the fact that their experience at the Mars Museum will forever be indelibly printed in their memories. As I remember the first time I heard live music during the pandemic. Yeah. And they will always remember being at the Mars Museum on our back parking deck. Right. And I think that's the best way to ensure that they come back in the spring. And I can't imagine why they wouldn't. They no longer have the New Jersey section, but they know New Jersey's here. They know we're still just a little drive over the river.
Right. So, well, in addition to the New York Times, the Morse Museum's name was getting out there in so many different ways. There was one evening I was driving, it was a Sunday night in September, and I was driving just 2 miles away to a friend's backyard to have a drink. And I was listening to WQXR, and it was just low, and I think I was on the phone, and I said, wait a minute, stop. They're talking about Lot of Strings Music Festival. And in between songs, they were playing a piece by Orpheus, and they were talking about how this is happening at the Morse Museum in Morristown. That's great for us in our live arts department. It's great for the museum. It's also really great for this community. You know, everyone listening in that moment, and they mentioned us on other occasions as well, is becoming aware that exciting and meaningful artistic experiences happen here.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions coming in, I would just like to thank all of our listeners, watchers, askers, members, friends, and just say, see you all soon.
Very good.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. And I hope to see you at more upcoming Member Appreciation Month events in the future. Check our website on the membership page and check your emails for more updates coming soon.
Great. Bye.
Bye-bye.